By the beginning of the 20th century, Texas was a vastly different place from what it had been in 1821. At the end of the Spanish period, there were only about 3,000 non-Native Americans living in Texas, while Native Americans outnumbered them nearly 10 to 1. Within 80 years, however, Texas's population had grown to roughly 3 million people. Nearly 80% of these Texans were farmers who lived outside of cities. Texas cities at the turn of the century looked very different from their modern counterparts, and not necessarily for the better. Urban areas were filthy and lacked basic infrastructure such as garbage collection and sewer systems. Because people relied heavily on horses for transportation, animal manure mixed freely with sewage and trash. As a result, disease spread easily, particularly as microbes contaminated city water supplies. Although automobiles might seem like a potential solution, in the early 1900s, cars were luxury items rather than common modes of transportation. The prevalence of disease made doctors highly sought after in urban areas. However, medical treatment at the time was limited. Physicians often relied on opium and alcohol to relieve pain rather than curing the underlying illness. Despite these limitations, the spread of disease encouraged the establishment of hospitals, which eventually incorporated new medical technologies such as X-ray machines. Hospitals therefore played a key role in an emerging trend of the early 20th century, urbanization. Cities also drove the growth of public education. Under the Texas Constitution, the state government was not permitted to fund public schools, leaving cities responsible for financing them. Larger cities were able to raise more revenue and thus provide better school facilities, books, supplies, and teachers. Urban schools could afford to spend approximately $8 per child, while rural schools could spend only about $5 per child, widening the gap between urban and rural education. Another important feature of urbanization was the rise of organized sports. In the early 1900s, the most popular sport in Texas was horse racing, largely because so many Texans owned horses and raced them for entertainment. Boxing was also extremely popular. One of the most famous boxers of the era was Jack Johnson, a native of Galveston who worked on the city's docks and earned extra money as a prize fighter. Johnson eventually became the first black heavyweight champion of the world. Johnson's success directly challenged the prevailing belief in white superiority. The idea that a black boxer could defeat both black and white opponents and stand atop the boxing world deeply unsettled many white Americans. In response, they searched for a great white hope who could defeat Johnson. They believed they had found that figure in Jim Jeffries, a former heavyweight champion who had been retired for 6 years. Jeffries famously declared, "I am going into this fight for the sole purpose of proving that a white man is better than a Negro." The bout took place in Reno, Nevada, before a crowd of 20,000 spectators. It lasted 15 rounds, and ended when Jeffries' corner threw in the towel. Johnson later remarked that he knew he had won by the 4th round. Humiliated by his defeat, Jeffries admitted afterward that even at his best, he would never have defeated Johnson. However, many white Americans refused to accept the outcome, and the fight sparked race riots across the country.